Hey everyone, this is Kalegi with Tim Moore reminding you that SportsSpeak is now powered by SeatGeek. SeatGeek is the one-stop shop for tickets to sporting events, concerts, and so much more.
Use the promo code SportsSpeak at checkout for $20 off your first purchase.
SeatGeek, let there be live. Now, on to the show. Hey, how's it going, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of SportsSpeak Live, powered by SeatGeek. Promo code SportsSpeak, all caps, one word, $20 off your first purchase. It's episode 164. I'm Kalegi.
And I'm Tim Moore.
We're going to have Jewah joining us in a few minutes. It's Super Bowl week. Tim, I know everybody talks about how great October is for sports. I think February really rivals that. You've got the Super Bowl, at least for us as NASCAR fans. We just saw the Clash, the Daytona 500's coming up. The NBA trade deadline, which we're going to touch on in a moment. And oh, by the way, you see that field behind me, pitchers and catchers reporting in just a week, and still a lot of dominoes to fall in Major League Baseball free agency. So we will have plenty to talk about over the next few weeks in our next few episodes. But today's focus, it's going to be the Super Bowl with Drew. But before that, let's talk some NBA trade deadline. I just posted an article, sports-speak.com, talking about why I think the New York Knicks have to be the winners of the deadline right here. And it's a very underrated move, but Alec Burks and Bojan Bogdanovic both have playoff experience, both have a lot in the tank. Alec Burks scored 27 in a playoff game for the Knicks 3 years ago. They come over from the Pistons. The Knicks do not give up a first-round pick. And while they did have to give up R.J. Barrett and Emmanuel quickly to bring in OG Anunoby, and I know Anunoby's been a little bit banged up lately, when he's been out there, he's been really, really good. Jalen Brunson is absolutely an all-star. Julius Randle, for the most part, has been good this season. And despite Mitchell Robinson's injury, Harkenstein has done a good job at center. Precious Achiuwa has done well. Taj Gibson, who always gets a roster spot when Tom Thibodeau is the head coach, he plays well. So in a year where, whether you consider, the new rules or just in general, a lot of teams being in the mix, that nobody really wanted to make a big risk at the trade deadline, the Knicks did. And also in a season with the Eastern Conference, Tim, the Bucks have this whole debacle with their head coaching situation. You add Doc Rivers. The Celtics, who are really good, have also shown vulnerability at times this season. The Sixers are killed because Joel Embiid's hurt. Miami's been spiraling. And your Cavs did nothing again at the deadline. All of a sudden, I think the Knicks, despite not having a superstar player per se, could be in a good spot to go on a deep run. And by the way, the household names, the superstars, they haven't necessarily paid off in championships lately. Maybe the Knicks can bring some magic back to New York. And I think if there's any season, the Knicks might be able to do it this year. And this unit they have is definitely one of the deepest in the league.
You see, it's very weird for me because when you tie things in terms of James Dolan and being successful, it's a very weird thing. Because think about it. What's also dominating the New York scene at the same time currently? It's the New York Rangers, who as well have a huge, huge possibility of maybe winning Stanley Cup. When I look at this Knicks roster, I mean, first off, I don't even think it's getting Burksetti, to be honest with you. That's big. I think it's getting Bogdanovic. I have loved Bogdanovic all the way back to his Utah days with Donovan Mitchell, where you've seen nothing but consistency, productivity, and his capability to shoot and be effective. I actually argue that I feel he is one of the most underrated players in the entirety of the NBA. And of course, he played for a bad team this year and now finds himself with the New York Knicks. But what I love about the New York Knicks urgency, Eddie, and why I truly believe they won this deadline despite all the limitations, which, again, is relatively fair, right? There's not really big superstars available because of all these changes. But the Knicks already, after trading for Noonboy, or however you pronounce it, I still get OG's name wrong, but that's besides the point.
A Noonboy?
A Noonboy? How do you pronounce the last name? I'm there we go. I'm not a Knicks fan. I made this very clear, okay? I'm a Cavs fan. Anyways, the point is this. From the small samples I've seen of the Knicks, because again, basketball this season, truthfully for me, and we talked about it during Christmas time, right, where at times it almost feels like the season's a little bit unwatchable. It's not as exciting as past years. And it's funny because at the time, maybe the Cavs were struggling. They were at the 8th seed around Christmas. Now they're in the 2 seed in the Eastern Conference. But the way I view it for the Knicks is their depth is just so good before this trade that realistically, Coach Thibodeau has a roster that you can say 1 through 10, 1 through 12, whatever it is, to to actually play productive basketball when it matters. And that's what I feel a lot of teams are lacking when it comes to the playoffs and why we see inconsistencies. The Knicks, listen, Jalen Brunson to me is a superstar. I, I've never seen a player so beloved in New York outside of Aaron Judge, of course, that has just come and made an instant impact and people get behind him. I really do, and I see all these arguments. Oh, who's the second best behind Aaron Judge in New York? I really do argue it's Jalen Brunson, and I think it's a fair argument with the impact of what he's done to embrace the city. And despite what we forget is relatively sketchy conditions behind Brunson coming in, with his father being on the coaching staff at the time. I think the fact of the matter that the Knicks got him is huge, and the fact that he really can potentially lead this team to the promised land. Again, and I keep on saying, I'm not a Knicks fan. I want to emphasize that. But I'm getting to a point as a New Yorker, and of course, you live in New Jersey, Eddie, but I'm getting to the point as a New Yorker, where I'm just desperate to see a championship in the city again. I don't care who it comes from. I don't care if it's from a team I don't root from. I didn't even care if it was the Buffalo Bills. Granted, it's not a New York City team, but it's New York State. I just want to see New York win a championship. That if the New York Knicks come to the time and it's them versus the Cavaliers, of course I'm going to root for the Cavs, but I'm not going to be upset if the Knicks win, because if it means a championship for the state of New York, that's what it means. So I'll end it with that. I think that the Knicks definitely, though, won the deadline, and you should be scared of their depth because there's going to be a lot of meaningful minutes coming down the road for this group.
Yeah, a couple points I just want to make off of that. First off, with the Knicks, a lot of people talk about with Rutgers, for example, the culture changers that changed that team from being a bottom of the barrel Division I program to being a perennial contender for the NCAA tournament. The Knicks need this group to be their culture changers, because there's a serious problem that they're a pinnacle franchise in the sport. They play in the nicest arena in the NBA. They play in the biggest city in the country. And Carmelo Anthony is the only superstar that's gone there in the last 20 years. This is the group that can turn the tide on that. And not only can they do that, they can contend for a championship. So that's what makes it special. Number two, I agree with you that they're the winners of the deadline. There are a couple other teams I just want to make note of. First off, I want to bring up my Nets, who there's not much to talk about this year. It's been a rough season. Maybe they'll sneak into the play-in. I'm glad Spencer Dinwiddie's off the team. Frankly, I was confused why he was back last year. They do get some stuff back from Dinwiddie. They get Dennis Schroeder, and they cut ties with Royce O'Neal, who had been a good piece for the last couple of years, but wasn't really part of the future plan. Thunder, also interesting because the Western Conference really had almost no trades. The Mavericks bring in PJ Washington, and that's not really that noteworthy. The Thunder do add Gordon Hayward, which is a move that I personally like. I think he's still got a little bit left in him. And for a team that's so young, a veteran presence in Hayward, who's been a catalyst on playoff runs for both Utah and Boston before, I think is a good asset to have in that locker room. But at some point, Sam Presti, I know he's so excited how many picks he's been able to stock, and so far he's hit on them in the draft. Josh Giddey, minus the scandals, is a pretty good basketball player. Both Jalen Williams have been good, Chet Holmgren. But you got to make trades eventually. You got to try to bring in some talent because you've got a good roster there. You got an MVP candidate in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander leading that team. You need to bring in some players. You can't just keep waiting and waiting and waiting, or else those guys are going to get old or you're not going to be able to afford them. You can't have an endless window. The window is currently now for the Thunder. I'm glad they added Hayward, but I wish they did more.
No, I absolutely do wish they did more. But what I was going to say, Eddie, is the thing about Hayward in general is just health. If he is healthy, he could be a productive basketball player. I know things all the way back to the time where he was in Boston didn't work out, right? And it felt like he was getting injured left and right. But Hayward can find ways to be a productive NBA player, and he can find ways to evolve himself. And again, every team, and this is the big thing I think you just mentioned, Eddie, that you hit on. Every team needs a leader. Doesn't matter what sport it is. Every team needs a locker room leader and that person that leads by example to develop a culture. And that's why I'm very irritated, not to go backwards, but why I'm irritated about the Cleveland Cavaliers is because I still feel outside of Donovan Mitchell, yeah, the Cavs have good basketball players on them. Don't get me wrong. But the idea that you can't improve on your weaknesses or perhaps get Donovan Mitchell, maybe that second leader on this group that can be outspoken and, try to be out there and play meaningful minutes for a team or lead by example, you couldn't even get at minimum a veteran that, could be looking for a championship. That to me is just what makes it very difficult because I feel no matter how good of a team you are, you should always take the effort to make an addition. And it digs at me when Brian Cashman doesn't make deadline moves because, again, great. Yeah, your core's meshing. Yeah, there's a lot of time to go. But injuries can happen. A lot of things can happen. And then what happens down the second half of the season? Your hands could be tied. So, again, I do wish the Thunder made a lot more moves. But I will also say this about the Thunder. Let's be honest. If we looked at them 2 years ago and said, hey, they could be potentially competing for a championship, you would have to say a lot of things went right in terms of their rebuild, right? So I would like to say this for the Thunder. I still think a championship could be looming in the future, but they are ahead of schedule in terms of what their rebuild looks like, and that's what we can't forget. So I'm excited to see what their future looks like. But overall, as long as they continue to stay with the process, and God, I hate that term so much because of Philadelphia, but if they continue to stay with their process, I think that they will stay on course and they will continue to find success as they were seeing this season and down the road for maybe even creating a dynasty of championships.
Well, we shall see. As we've said before in the show, I think the trade deadline is when the real NBA season starts, and we'll have a lot more to talk about. But let's move on to our NFL segment with Drew Jewah. Well, let's transition to the gridiron right now. We got Drew Jewah joining us. Super Bowl coming up, second time in 4 years, Chiefs and Niners facing off. But Drew's a fan of the Atlanta Falcons, so let's give them their due diligence first. So you get your coach. It's someone who's coached the team before in Raheem Morris, but you don't get Bill Belichick. Your reaction?
I'm not too upset. Anybody that's not Arthur Smith is like heaven sent because he can take T-Glass said it best in the group chat. He can take a 3-win team and make them a 7-win team, but he can take a 10-win team and make them a 3-win, like a 7-win team. And it's just like I'm hoping that this next season we utilize our weapons and that like Bijan gets the touches that he needs. But even going back to the draft, I still don't understand that we took Bijan. And I'm not saying he's a bad running back. We had Tyler Algier, who really flourished at the end of the season for the Falcons in 2022. And we draft with our first round pick a running back. And, Bijan was a rookie of the year candidate, but he wasn't really just given the ball. He's kind of like Kyle Pitts at the running back position. And I'm hoping that the guys who, should get their touches. And I'm excited. I don't really know. Because I knew Jim Harbaugh also auditioned for the head coaching job and he didn't get it. So I'm excited that it's a new coach, and I'm hoping that the Falcons can go back to their Matt Ryan ways and, have a chance to win a Super Bowl.
Yeah, now let's think about the Super Bowl here. Patrick Mahomes against Brock Purdy, Tim. So the Niners get it done against the Lions. They come back in that game. Detroit chokes it away. You get the catch from Ayuk that goes off the helmet. Dan Campbell plays with fire way too many times. I mean, at some point you got to just kick a field goal. I don't understand this. I mean, you're not beating arguably the best team in the league with that strategy. I know it's worked all year, but you lost complete confidence in your kickers and you decided just not to use them at all. I digress on that, but the 49ers heading into this Super Bowl. This is a team that's been on the cusp year in and year out. Even in a bad season 2 years ago, they made it to the NFC Championship game. Is this finally the year that they can get this done?
No, the 49ers will not win the Super Bowl. It can't happen. It just can't. I'm going to lose my mind if I hear one more thing. And now I'm starting to sound like Zoe when I say this. Just like how she has her beef with Lamar, okay, or Tom Brady, my beef is now with Brock Purdy. I cannot stand Brock Purdy anymore. I am sorry. He's the most overrated quarterback. He is a check down merchant. He is a system QB at best. And the 49ers do not win a Super Bowl against a good defense as soon as their deep threats are taken away. So the fact of the matter is, and here's the real truth of it, the 49ers made the Super Bowl this year, Eddie, so you understand, off of two bad games from their quarterback. Let's be honest, Brock Purdy didn't do anything great against the Lions. The one drive that resulted in a Brandon Ayuk touchdown was ultimately brought to life because of a dropped easy interception by the Detroit Lions. The first game as well, I mean, I don't know. My point is Brock Purdy just hasn't looked good. And the fact of the matter is that I just view it as if they're going to win the Super Bowl, he needs to be good. And I truthfully don't think he's that good. And really, for this Kansas City team, this is the first time in history, really history for Kansas City, where you can argue their defense is just as good as their offense. And I know a lot of people are going to hate on Kansas City. Why? Because, well, Patrick Mahomes is easy to hate. He has another distraction going to the Super Bowl, this time his father getting a DUI. Everybody hates right now and is tired of Taylor Swift. That's all great and grand. But when you look at the legacy of Andy Reid and you look at the Kansas City Chiefs, who has the better quarterback? The Kansas City Chiefs. Who has the better defense? The Kansas City Chiefs. On paper, in my opinion, despite everything that Kansas City had to go through this year, they are the better team. And I think they're going to prove it on Sunday. Because to me, outside of the running back position, there is nobody. Well, okay, maybe Kittle. I can argue as well on San Francisco, but there is nobody I would take from that San Francisco team outside of those two guys that I would say, hey, I'd want you on Kansas City, because that's what I truthfully believe the Chiefs are that good. And I'll end it on this. If the Chiefs win the Super Bowl, you're damn right I'm eating some more cheeseburgers like I did last year when they beat the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah, I can't disagree with anything you said. Brock Purdy, I was having this discussion with somebody else. I said that there were 17 quarterbacks in the NFL right now. If you put them on that Niners roster, they'd play the same way that they did en route to the Super Bowl. I don't know if they'd necessarily make the Super Bowl, but they definitely get really close to it. Purdy had there's ways that Brock Purdy could screw it up, and he hasn't, and I'll give him credit for that. But he's not that great. He's good. I give him a little more credit, I think, than you do, Tim, because I mean, he did go almost a full calendar year without losing a regular season game, but I do have my doubts with him, and he is a check down merchant, like you've said. He does not have an accurate deep ball whatsoever, and I'm not going to try to argue that my quarterback, Jalen Hurts,
I
is a much more
presented the
accurate
stats
deep
in the
ball,
group
but
chat.
yeah.
What literally one passing touchdown to 30 plus or more yards in the air. And of course, his stats going to get inflated on that Ayuk catch that should have been an interception. But it's frustrating. It is frustrating. You cannot succeed in the NFL, not just as a quarterback, but as a starting quarterback and being considered a top tier quarterback for a top tier team if you cannot throw the ball downfield. And again, every quarterback's going to have their weakness, but it is very different to be somebody like Lamar, for example, who may not exactly have the world's greatest deep ball, but find ways to make plays with his legs. And for the record, I will give Brock Purdy credit this. He made plays with his legs. That's what helped them against Detroit. You want to say if that made a difference? Yes. But the throwing and everything, he just wasn't he wasn't productive in what I saw personally last, or was it 2 weeks ago now, to this point against Detroit, that I could say, wow, he can beat Patrick Mahomes. And for the record, I just want to also, because I know I've already ran through my point, but I also want to say this. I would not be surprised if, based on everything we've seen from this playoff, guys, that this is going to be the high scoring Super Bowl. Because you have two good defenses, two explosive offenses. On paper, people are going to say they're even. And I think it's fair to say the 49ers are probably quote unquote favorites going into this Super Bowl based on everything. But it's going to be high scoring. It's going to be explosive. It comes down to, I think, again, who has the better quarterback.
Drew, your thoughts?
I'm just hoping that I'm not like I'm not like a Brock Purdy hater, but oh my goodness, the look on Tim's face when the 49ers beat the Chiefs is going to be something that you can't repeat. It's like the same thing of when the Giants lose every game. He's going to be like, oh, wow. But no, dude, I understand people think Brock Purdy's bad and he's a check down merchant, but you're saying 17 quarterbacks better, but Brock Purdy has a winning record, and you can't throw every single quarterback. I just think the Brock Purdy hate is kind of on the same level. Not really, but like
Tyrod Taylor has a winning record. Tyrod Taylor has a winning record. I'd argue Tyrod Taylor is a better deep ball quarterback than Brock Purdy is.
But my thing is Brock Purdy isn't Tyrod Taylor. Like, I just think it's when it comes down to Brock Purdy and the whole Taylor Swift and the Chiefs situation, they are on the same level of everybody hates them because they aren't them. Like, I understand that Brock Purdy doesn't have the most accurate deep ball and he's not the most like quarterback. It all comes back to the fact that he was Mr. Irrelevant and nobody really cares anymore that he's Mr. Irrelevant because he's proved himself that he can win games.
Mr. Irrelevant's a great story, but what does it have to do with the fact that he can't throw down?
This is the same thing. This is the same thing as the Justin Fields situation. You hate Justin Fields, so you don't like him. That is not true.
Quarterback. There's a difference. I don't think Brock Purdy's a good quarterback.
Your hate for him is
you want the difference?
Unmatched.
But you want the difference? Brock Purdy was drafted last overall. Justin Fields was hyped up to be a generational quarterback at points and was expected to be the future of the NFL and was drafted in the first round. Nobody had expectations of Brock Purdy. I was rooting for him last year, especially against the Philadelphia Eagles, but unfortunately he got hurt. That's the reality of it. But also the other reality of it is, despite all the chaos, he has still looked consistent from the year prior to this year in terms of what you see on the football field, which goes to my point. Again, if you shut down Brock Purdy short game, medium game, and let the 49ers try to torch the Kansas City defense deep, guess what's going to happen? Because we saw it in that first half against Detroit. It's going to look ugly. It's going to look hideous. At the end of the day, you want to win a big game. A good quarterback is going to make the difference. And I hate to say it because I go all the way back down to the 2015 Super Bowl where it was Peyton Manning versus Cam Newton. Peyton Manning was experienced. He was out of his prime. He stank. But Cam Newton, choking in the clutch, somebody that was the MVP, considered to be a top-tier quarterback, who realistically, and I'm tired of also hearing about how he should be in the NFL because he also is not that good. Guess what? There's realisms to it. And that's the fact of the matter. I don't know what else to say. Brock Purdy is not that good, and he's going to get exposed on Sunday.
Brock Purdy is getting compared to every quarterback in the book right now. I think the more important conversation we need to have here, which Tim touched on and then just forgot about, Kansas City Chiefs have their best defense they've ever had with Patrick Mahomes, by far. And I know they had the injury on the defensive line. The secondary for the Kansas City Chiefs this year is ridiculous. So even if Brock Purdy could throw the deep ball, the defensive back group for Kansas City is really, really talented this season, and they can get to the quarterback. And frankly, the Niners have a lot of really good assets on their offense and their defense. Besides Trent Williams, that O-line has been a little bit shaky this postseason, particularly against Detroit. And if Kansas City can rush, especially up the middle with Chris Jones, they can make it a difficult time for Brock Purdy, who is mobile. But I think that's something else to think about too. So as much as we're bashing Brock Purdy here, I think another factor that's going to make it really difficult for San Francisco is the fact that the Chiefs have their best defense that they've gone to a Super Bowl with in this Patrick Mahomes era.
Yeah, I once again go back to, I think that Tim kind of just overhates Brock Purdy. And I just think that the 49ers have a little bit of an edge. Yes, I do agree that the Chiefs defense has been way better than it has been the past couple of seasons. So when they have Trent McDuffie and, Justin Reed and all the other safeties and quarterbacks they have, they're going to be hard. It's going to be hard to pass over the top. Granted, you guys say he can't pass over the top, so what does he have to worry about? I understand that he's a check down merchant, but
Those
when
are
you
the ones you
have
have to worry about. If your game's being played within 30 yards, guess what? If he's refusing to throw the deep ball, you're not going to be able to throw the deep ball. That's my point. So at the end of the day, as I'm dropping everything here,
my
if you're
favorite is when Tim cuts me off, but I let him talk because I'm respectful. I let you get your full say, and then you cut me off halfway through. Anyways, what I was saying was when you have, these huge targets where you have Kittle, you have Christian McCaffrey, when you have Deebo Samuel, you have Brandon Ayuk, you're not going to have to throw the ball 30 yards down the field every single play. You can trust your players to make moves. Like, you don't always have to just huck it down 30 yards. I understand there's some teams like Tua do that. Patrick Mahomes sometimes does that. Other teams do that. But Brock Purdy and the 49ers have a team based around where they can let Brock Purdy check down and make those throws. He doesn't have to be, throwing it 30 yards down the field. And I understand that he isn't the, most ideal quarterback when it comes to throwing it down the field. But when he has those targets to throw it short, he's going to throw it short. You're not going to want to make those big mistakes. And when they were down, he was having to throw it short. And yes, when you're down 17 points, you're going to have to make those throws. He wasn't perfect, but I do think he's just a little bit overhated. And I think you guys are just letting him slip under the radar just a little bit. And when it comes down to this game, I think the Chiefs are going to make more mistakes than the 49ers, and Brock Purdy is going to be the Super Bowl MVP. That is my hot take.
All right, well, let's get to our picks here. I'll start things off. Kansas City, the big question has been the receiving core, which in the end of the playoffs has not been that bad. You've gotten Kadarius Toney completely out of the picture, which is good. MVS makes up for the Eagle game by making the catch to secure a conference championship. Rashee Rice, they really found something with him. He is very talented. And I mean, Travis Kelce has been the best pass catcher this postseason for any team by far. So it seems like he almost conserved in the second half of the regular season for the playoffs. And with Taylor Swift in attendance, he's been great. And as I said, the defense has been good, and I just trust Mahomes a little bit more than Purdy. And while I think the Niners defense has a slight edge over Kansas City's, I think the Chiefs are going to get it done yet again because Kyle Shanahan still has had trouble winning the big game in the past, and I think that's going to happen yet again. So my final score, Chiefs take it 31-24. And Patrick Mahomes wins Super Bowl MVP. As much as, as an Eagle fan, it's awkward rooting for Kansas City after they beat the Eagles in the Super Bowl last year, and I can't stand the whole Mahomes family and the whole Swift thing and everything, but I'd rather see them win the Super Bowl than San Francisco, and I think that's what's going to happen. Drew, you gave your Super Bowl pick with San Francisco winning it, Purdy MVP. What do you have as the final score?
Here, I'm gonna walk y'all through my thought process. It's gonna be 31-31. Patrick Mahomes just drove down and kicked the field goal. Well, he didn't kick the field goal, but you know what I mean. He could do it all. Brock Purdy, 2 minutes left on the clock. He has a legacy drive. They go down, kick a field goal, and win 34-31. I have Brock Purdy winning the Super Bowl MVP because of that final drive. I could honestly see Christian McCaffrey winning it, but I do see Brock Purdy taking that final step forward and implanting his legacy definitely in the 49ers franchise.
All right, and Tim, you passionately said the Niners will not win the Super Bowl. What's the final score going to be?
I actually have a close score to you, Eddie, but I have it being 34-27. And realistically, again, I think this is the kind of game because, again, as much as I despise Brock Purdy in terms of his play, Drew, I feel that it's the defenses that make the difference for both sides. And you can't ignore Chase Young. You can't ignore Nick Bosa. Those are two dominant edge threats. And Eddie, you mentioned Chris Jones, right? Who, might I add, when you go all the way back to the start of year in that particular Detroit game, who was Kansas City without, right? So despite all these adversities, again, this is why I'm bought into the Chiefs. Maybe it's because I'm a Giants fan. I don't know. I have a lot of faith in Steve Spagnuolo. Spags has been nothing but consistent, and he is as advertised as a defensive coordinator. Andy Reid has been nothing but consistent since coming to Kansas City. And the fact that this team, again, has defied all odds. This team, let's be realistic, should not even have gone this far with how bad its offense is. But Patrick Mahomes has carried the load, carried the thing. And again, I'm tired of all the hate on him because I get it. It's annoying. They're in the picture. He's new Tom Brady. That's great. But there's a reason why Tom Brady won 7 championships, right? And I think Patrick Mahomes is better than Tom Brady, quite frankly. So I'm going to put the GOAT in the conversation of, or who I think is the new GOAT, that is, in the conversation of winning another championship. So again, I have Mahomes 34-27.
Last topic, I want to talk about the Clash quickly. So we're going to be doing our NASCAR picks again on the Motorsports Today account. We retweeted that on our account last week. We got 6 people consolidated into one thing. Quick impressions from the Clash. Drew, I'll go to you first. So NASCAR has to react. I think made definitely the right move when you look at the weather. It unfortunately didn't work in their favor, but they had to move it to Saturday night. Didn't have a lot of fans there, but people did tune in and watch. And I think in general, pretty good race that I think was kind of hurt by the TV coverage, which is still very lacking from Fox, though I did like Kevin Harvick in the booth. The racing was pretty good. We got some short track drama. I think with the package, it's okay at the Coliseum. Interested to see how it works the other 3 short tracks this year. But how about Denny Hamlin making the big moves at the end? Looked like it was going to be between Ty Gibbs, Joey Logano, maybe Kyle Larson. But Hamlin, right place, right time, gets the win. And again, looking for a championship. He's come so close each of the last really 5 years. And, you know, the clock is ticking for him, and we'll see if this is a good start for him. I mean, Logano won the Clash a couple years ago and won the championship, and Denny starts his season off with a win.
Yeah, it was an impressive race. Joe Gibbs definitely had the edge over the field. You saw Ty Gibbs lead early, and he did have the fastest car, and it kind of seemed a little interesting, like especially near the end when Denny Hamlin was locking up the tires, and it didn't seem to slow him down any at all. And I mean, good for Denny Hamlin, winning the Clash. I think it was pretty close last year as well. He led some laps there, but what I want to really touch on is just the poor camera work. I mean, I don't really want to, go too much in detail, but I feel like, especially for the Clash, it shouldn't be all about the race. And we missed a lot of things. I remember going on Twitter, and a Denny Hamlin fan posted 4 pictures, and I think we missed the last lap wreck between Ross Chastain, Tyler Reddick, Bubba Wallace leaving the race before it was even finished. And then, the whole incident with Ricky Stenhouse getting out of the car and going up and confronting, who was it?
McDowell.
Did he go and confront McDowell? No, he didn't. No, I think it was somebody. It was John Hunter. He went and confronted John Hunter.
He had 2 pieces in one race.
Yeah, and then that's my biggest issue, because it's not all about the racing, and I feel like commercials aren't also the best. I don't know, like the whole licensing behind it, but I feel like we missed a lot, and I think that would have made the race just a tad bit better. I didn't really see anything else besides that. I know that we had a couple wrecks, and I understand like the whole like halfway thing with MGK, and I heard like a little bit of like the story where he just left because there was no audio tested. But not everything's going to be perfect, especially when you have to move the race up a whole night. And I think NASCAR did the right thing with moving up the race a day early. It put on a good show, but what I would rather have, and I know Dale Jr. also touched on it, is I want that like anticipation of, the Clash going back to Daytona, because I miss having the Clash of Daytona, because, we don't have practices anymore, and we're already so limited on, restrictor plate racing, testing, and, practice when it comes to that. And I feel like the Daytona 500 doesn't have the same hype as it did a couple of years ago, because you're basically just guessing on pole. We obviously know Hendrick's going to be good every year, but the first practice and everybody's going to be together is the duels. And I miss having that, 2-hour practice where, these teams are pushing and, they can work with everybody. I wish it was for all series, but I understand that NASCAR has these limitations, but that's what I want to look forward to in the next couple of years, is them moving back to Daytona, bringing back practice sessions. And, I think that's what will have NASCAR, have kind of the hype back.
Yeah, I do like the Coliseum, but I think, trying to extend speed weeks a little bit is something that a lot of fans would like, but we'll cut the episode at that. Thank you to Drew Jewah for joining us. Next week, recapping the Super Bowl, previewing the Daytona 500. Busy time in sports. And if you seek it, we speak it right here on Sports Speak Live. But until next time, I'm Eddie Kalegi.
And I'm Tim Moore.
Signing off here from SSL episode 164. Enjoy the Super Bowl, and we'll talk to you next week.